If you've been painting miniatures and building models for a while, the next big step you're going to want to do is to get an airbrush. And the airbrush itself can be fairly inexpensive. The expense comes in with the air compressor, which is what you're going to need. I have 3 here that are in 3 different states of usefulness. And we're going to go over some of the features and show you what you can expect to pay for an air compressor, what to look out for, and what features to get. My first air compressor I had was this Grex air compressor right here. It cost a little over $200, around $220 I think. Bought about 4 years ago. However, I haven't used it. I didn't use it a whole lot in those first 2 years. I used it a lot more the last 2 years. And this is a 1/8 horsepower air compressor, and it doesn't work anymore. It slightly works, but I'll go into the issues I have with this one in just a moment. Badger Aspire airbrush right over here. This is a 1/6 horsepower air compressor. Cost about, I could have sworn I paid less for this, but online searching around I found it for about $180. I thought I got it for about $120. I could be wrong on that one, but we have the Badger Aspire here, and I bought this about 2 years ago. And this one also has issues and doesn't work too well anymore. Again, go into that in a moment. And finally over here, this big one is the air compressor I just got today. This is a 1/5 horsepower compressor with an air tank on it, which has its own benefits. And I got this for $80 off of Amazon, and it is a no-name air compressor. And we'll go over those features in just a minute. But let's first start with these two. So the Grex and the Badger, the first thing you'll notice is they look virtually the same, and that's because, well, they pretty much are. A lot of companies who sell airbrushes that also sell compressors, they just buy them from China or wherever and slap their name on them and call them their own airbrushes or airbrush compressors. So these are virtually the same, and I've taken them apart, and inside they are virtually the same. There are some slight difference. The Grex is a bit more expensive. It does have a smaller motor in it though. But there are some things I noticed, like for example, this little plate in the back that covers the motor. It is steel on the back of the Grex. On the Badger, it's plastic. The Grex has, I'm not sure how they painted the Grex. I think this is a powder coat. I could be wrong, but all I know is it's very easy to clean off the spilled paint with solvent on this one. When I tried to do the same thing with the Badger, I actually ate through the paint on the compressor itself, the black paint. So this one is probably powder coated or something like that. This one is just spray painted, so a little bit cheaper there. But other than that, they are virtually the same. The Grex, the issue with the Grex here is something has gone wrong with the piston inside. When the piston should kick in to give you more air, I can feel it and you can hear it struggling. It's trying to pump air and it's not going anywhere. And it takes about 6 or 7 seconds for it to finally start pumping air. And so when you're airbrushing with your level PSI, and then it'll just dip down until the air finally, the piston finally kicks in, and it'll start spraying air again. So really can't airbrush with this anymore. This is almost trash. The Badger, again, 4 years I had this one, shelf life of 2 years. The Badger, used for about 2 years. This one has a leaking problem. It's not a major issue, but about every 30 seconds, even if you're not using the airbrush, the piston and the motor will kick on to refill the reservoir here with air. I took it all apart and tried to seal everything, and it still leaks. And on what it started doing recently is it'll be just sitting there, and all of a sudden there'll be like a pop and a psst, and all the air goes out of it, and then it seals itself and will fill back up with air. So the leak is getting worse. Another issue on the inside of these, I have taken these apart to try to extend their shelf life. This one has a metal cylinder for the piston. The Badger had a plastic one, which actually I called Badger to try to get them to, if they could send me new O-rings for this one, and to Badger's credit, they said that, what is the cylinder made out of? I said plastic, and they said, oh, well, that's an old model, we'll send you a metal one, which was great, but they never sent me the O-rings I asked for. So Badger's usually very reliable with their stuff. Grex I haven't contacted, so I don't know, but both of these are well out of warranty. Most airbrush compressors you're going to find are going to have about a 1-year warranty on them. But that's the situation here. So we have a over $200 air compressor here that really doesn't work at all anymore. We have a $180, $150 one here that still works, but is on its last leg. Now let's look at number 3. As I said, I just got this today, so I really haven't put it to use yet, but I got this for $80 on Amazon, and this is a no-name air compressor. Again, you can find this probably on eBay with other names slapped on it, but they all come from the same, they're all made the same, they come from the same company in China or whatever. So this is a 1/5 horsepower air compressor. So this has a lot more power than either one of those, definitely a lot more than the Grex. And the special thing here, it has an air tank on the bottom. The air tank is a good idea because instead of going right to the airbrush, the air will fill up the air tank. And without the air tank, you can get pulsing because the way the piston moves, you'll get spurts of air coming out instead of a straight, steady stream through your airbrush. It's not a huge issue anymore. Older, really old air compressors, that might be an issue, but it's not something I've noticed on my other two without a tank. One thing you can do to alleviate that problem, if you don't have one with an air tank, is to get a really, really long air hose for your airbrush, and that sort of will act like an air tank because that needs to fill up with air, and it helps to reduce that pulsing sensation that may occur with a cheaper or older air compressor. But this one is, again, $80 from Amazon, and the one thing I noticed right away is it's extremely light, which makes me nervous. I would think this thing would be twice as heavy with the steel tank, but when comparing it to the Grex or the Badger, they are roughly the same weight. I actually think this one, the bigger one, is slightly lighter. So that does worry me somewhat, but it has a 1-year warranty. If it lasts 2 years, well, then that's going to put it on the same life as the Grex or the Badger, but it's going to be a lot cheaper, $80 compared to $200. So I could buy 2.5 of these for the same price as I did the Grex. So even if it lasts 1 year, it's still under warranty, and it's still the same cost, essentially, that the Grex or the Badger would be. Now, I'm going to compare all three of them together, because a lot of people ask how loud are these if you're in a small apartment or what have you. This is not going to be a completely fair test because these two have a lot of wear and shelf life on them, so they're probably going to be a lot louder than the brand new one, which hasn't been used too much. But people ask how loud these things are, so I'm going to show you. I'm going to put my finger over the air outlet because that's where the hose normally connects to, and it's going to be louder if I don't cover this, and normally you have the hose here to block that sound. So we have the Badger, and you can see how much air fills into this thing, not much. The Grex, there we go, about the same size. And then we have our no-name $80 air compressor. So it's definitely quieter, first of all because it's brand new and hasn't been used, but also the air is going into the air tank. And you'll notice it's running a lot longer because it has to fill up this whole air tank before you can start using it. And definitely a lot more air in there. So if you're looking to buy an air compressor, what I would recommend is go cheap, because again, $200 plus, $160, $180, both lasted about 2 years. Even if this one lasts 2 years, well, it was only $80. So That would be my recommendation. I'm sure someone's gonna, in the comments, is gonna mention getting an oil compressor. They do have oil compressors that tend to be a lot more expensive and they last a lot longer. However, they tend not to be in portable sizes. You have to get a really big one. And if you're just getting an airbrushing, it's probably not expensive you're gonna want to get into. Other things you want to look for is a lot of them come with the air regulators and water traps on them. You definitely need one of these. Again, these two were actually, all three of these had them included. If you can find a really cheap one that doesn't have one, you're going to have to buy one, so remember that expense. These cost about $15 to $20 on eBay. You definitely want one that has a auto shut off feature. As if you notice, as this fills up, it automatically turns off. Without that automatic on-off feature, it would just keep running and running and running, even when you're not using the airbrush, which puts a lot of wear and tear on your air compressor. So those are 3 examples for you. And while we're on the subject, let's go ahead and take a look at airbrushes.